Good morning and welcome to my introduction to the CDS video. If you're watching this video, one of two things is true. You're either familiar with Spidz on YouTube or you're familiar with the CDS and you want to be familiar with the other one. And if that's where you are, then you've come to the right place. So if you've just watched Pink Ghost's CDS video, you can watch this one and learn about one of the 8 competitors. Probably the one you probably know the least about. Or if you know Spidz, but you don't know what the CDS is, you can hear me explain what the CDS is about. So this video is trying to go for 2 different audiences. But hopefully it's still interesting nonetheless. We've got a table of contents, who is Spidz when it comes to LOR, my logo and my team name explained, the CDS format explained, what you can expect out of my content from the CDS, and if you're new, what videos of mine do I recommend in order for you to understand what sort of stuff you can expect out of me. If you've watched a bunch of Spidz LOR, you'll notice that at the start of every series, I'll do a Google Slides, and every single time I've explained who I was just in case there would be new people joining, and this is no different. Because my hope is that with the CDS, it'll have I'm hoping that it'll grab the interest of a lot of people, because I think it's a really interesting format that they've done. And I just hope that a lot of people like it, not just for Spidz YouTube number go up boom, but also because I just think LOR is fascinating and this format is really, really cool. But if you want to know more about who I am, I got top 32 in the Curious Journey seasonal, which you probably will just remember as the Sun Disc seasonal, and I 9-0'd and then got top 8 in the Kaisar seasonal, or the Forces from Beyond seasonal. The first time I got to Masters was during Cosmic Creation, and I mostly mention this because for the first year and a bit of me playing this game, I was very much a casual player, right? I'd only ever played one card game before this, which was the Plants vs. Zombies card game, and as well as Slay the Spire and stuff. But that was the first time I got to Masters, and I've only really been competitive for a little bit of time. Even when I was in a Curious Journey, I didn't see myself as a competitive player. My favorite card in the game is Mountain Sojourners, followed by Jagged Taskmaster, and for the majority of my first year of playing this game, all I played was Jagged Taskmaster. If they had Mastery, before Shurima, Teemo and Jinx, which are my Taskmaster champions typically, would have been in the hundreds of thousands. They would have been so high. My favorite champion is Leona, followed by Aphelios. And my favorite region is Targon, although typically you'll see that I often play Demacian and Shuriman nonsense, as you can see from this graph. This is part of my 20-page spreadsheet where I go over a bunch of statistics, but one of the ones that I keep track of is the mastery that I've got for every champion. And what you'll notice is that the region that has the most mastery on my champions is Demacia, followed by Shurima, Targon, Bandle City, PNZ, and Noxus. Now, I should note with the Bandle City one that it sort of eats up all the Yordles from the other regions, so Lulu isn't counted for Ionia, it's counted for Bandle City, but the number there is based on the percentages, not based on the raw numbers, otherwise Bandle City would be number 1. This is this graph in full. If you just look at the M column, you can see specifically. I don't think this is too interesting, but you can see what sort of decks I don't enjoy playing, as opposed to the decks that I really do enjoy playing. I'm not a big fan of, for example, Nami decks, who has 0 mastery. I'm not a big fan of, Lurk, because Pike and Rek'Sai also have 0 mastery. You can tell these sorts of decks that I'm not a big fan of. Seraphine, I've still not played a game of, for example. And I just think this is something that you might want to know if you want to see what sort of decks I might end up playing during the Champion Draft series. To go over my team logo, my logo and my team name. The logo is just my profile picture, drawn by, my original profile picture was drawn by a friend of mine, but obviously all the logos were drawn by, an amazing artist on Twitter, who I think I should probably link in the description if I remember to. And you've got my character from my profile picture with her, palette that she often carries, acting like a leader with these 2 things next to it, and both of these are Taskmaster and Sojourners, right? Taskmaster is a 2-mana 3/2 that has this Bilgewater icon and has the harpoon that she carries, and the Sojourners is this 5-mana 4/5 that does this. Now, I've put these, I haven't put these, I asked the artist to put them like this, as the mana for their heads and the 4 and 5, because I think it is really humorous to imagine a leader of an army with a bunch of foot soldiers where all their heads are just mana, and their, body contortions are based on their stats and strength. I think this is a really cool idea, and it also just shows the LOR-ness of the tournament. The name is, I'll be honest, it's really hard to think of a name. Names are not, for team names, that's not something I've ever had to do in my prior life. Nothing in my last, years of living have prepared me for trying to create a team name that only includes me. So I went with one of the sayings that I like saying, which is redeemable qualities, which is what I say when I don't want to, commit to having an opinion on something. I'll say it's got some redeemable qualities. I didn't know if teams were going to be called like the Yep Crocs or just a Yep Croc. Like, I didn't know if I should consider this like a group of Yep Crocs or if I should consider it just like one big conglomerating Yep Croc. So I thought I'll put a the there and then they can decide if they want to keep the the or not. And I still don't know if I'm supposed to have a the there or not. This wasn't explained to me. So you've got open brackets of the, close brackets, redeemable qualities for what my team name is. The CDS format, for those that don't know what it is yet, and so I think will be explained in another video that Pink Ghost will make at some point. But just for those that are curious, each player gets to pick 10 champions. There's like 100 odd champions in the game, so 20 odd will be not included because there are 8 players. And Pink Ghost and a few others have ranked them from S to C. Pink Ghost, by the way, being the person that runs this whole thing that I am participating in. But they're going to be ranked S to C. And when the players pick the champions, they're only allowed 1 S tier champion, only allowed 2 A tier champions, only allowed 4 B tier champions, and only allowed 8 C tier champions. So that doesn't equal 10, that equals 15. But that means you're going to miss out on 5 champions, which will probably be like 4 C tiers and 1 B tier or something like that, right? And they're chosen in a snake-like format, right? So if you imagine all of the players in a row, so like Spidz, then Icado, then Elzon, then Absolution, right? I'd go first, then the next player would go second, and then once we go all the way through that 8, it does that backwards. So the person that goes last goes first for the second round, picking their next champion. You can imagine this as like the people at the end get to pick 2 in a row, and the people in center have to pick 1. There's many ways of imagining this, but it's chosen in a snake-like format. And the format is going to be best of 3 divergent luck, which is a format that they've created for this format, so it's different from Riot Luck. You are forced to use all 6 champion slots in all of your decks. You can't do like 1 Rumble, 1 Cannon, and then like a bunch of like 36 nebulous aggro cards, right? You're forced to use at least your champions to their fullest, right? 3 copies of each. Only 1 mono region deck is allowed, and related to this, to use a region's card, you are forced to have a champion from that region in order to pick that region's cards. So you can't do 2 Buildwater champions like Nami and Twisted Fate. I wrote splishing on accident. I meant to write splashing, but splishing is kind of funny. Splashing like Momentous Choice, right? You can't do that. You would need to have an Ionian champion. Now, you could do 3 Nami, 2 TF, 1 Lee Sin, but that means in your drafting phase, you need to pick Lee Sin. Otherwise, you won't have any access to Ionia the whole time, which means during the drafting phase, you're going to have to make sure you pick your regions interestingly, right? There are 10 regions in the game. You're not going to have access to all of them. Or you might have access to all of them, but not Runeterran champions. You're not going to be able to have like multiple champions from a region. Which I think is really, really interesting. And I think this format, it'll be fascinating to see how it ends up panning out. With keeping all of this in mind. And as a pseudo-competitive player, I'm just like fascinated by this format. By just the amount of logic you can use in deciding what champions you want to pick. And how that ends up playing out. And I think going like midway through the season and at the end of the season and seeing what those are, I think will be absolutely fascinating. Like what were the ramifications of picking certain champions, or what were the ramifications of not going for certain champions during the draft phase? I think the draft phase will be one of the most pivotal parts of this, and that happens in a week, so I think that'll be really interesting. The tournament structure is that there's 1 game per week fighting one other team. When I say team, it's just 1 person on each team. But fighting one team, and thus you fight every team once. The top 4 after these 7 weeks will move on to the final week to determine the winner. Now, there's a point system. There are 2 types of points. There's best of 3 wins, which will always take precedence. So if, the top 4 people have different amounts of best of 3 wins as opposed to the bottom 4 people, then those will go into the top 4. But if the 4th and 5th person have the same amount of best of 3 wins, there needs to be a delineation factor. And that delineation factor is tiebreakers. Well, that's what that is, but that's determined by individual game wins. Individual game wins being like, if everything's a best of 3, it's the singular games within the best of 3. And they'll also determine seeding for the top 4. One thing I think that's interesting here is that going 0 and 2 will get you 0 game win points, which is just for the individual game wins. 1 and 2 will get you 1 game win point, 2 and 1 will get you 2 game win points. But importantly, if you go 2 and 0, you get 3 game win points, which means that you should definitely be playing for your 2 and 0s as opposed to your 2 and 1s, right? If you're somehow 1 and 0 and you're deciding maybe I'll just throw for no reason, you really should not. This is the ranking. If you remember from before, you get to pick 1 S tier, 2 A tiers, 4 B tiers, etc. And I think this ranking is fascinating. I could be looking at this for hours and just like trying to absorb all of the interesting like intricacies that you can steal from this, because there's so many interesting things going on. For example, Gwen Elise, and Katarina are all in the S tier, so you can't run Red Gwen. Just Red Gwen is not possible. You can't even run like Spider aggro with Gwen. Now you could run Spider aggro with another champion, but if you wanted to run Spider aggro, you would need Elise and a Noxus champion, which will probably end up being something like a Darius, which you can find in the B tier, right? Or you might have to go and find Vladimir because you've stolen all your B tiers, or your B tiers are going elsewhere. Or maybe you want Darius for your Sejuani deck, and then you have to go to Vladimir or something, so that you're getting an S tier here, as opposed to going up here and stealing a Swain, which might be important for another deck. That sort of thing, right? Now, if you know me, you might know that I am sort of known for Sivir Akshan. If you look at what I brought to a lot of my tournaments, like the seasonal tournaments, I brought Sivir Akshan to a lot of them, including the Kaisar seasonal, and you'll notice that Sivir Akshan and Kaisar are mutually exclusive. Oh, that was this one down here. I mention this because Sivir and Akshan, they're in the S tier. They're right here. They are mutually exclusive in this format. Now, another issue, obviously, with Sivir Akshan is that I wouldn't be able to play Demacia, right? I would need to run like 3 Sivir, 2 Akshan, and like a Garen. So maybe I'll end up doing something like Sivir Garen. I might steal Sivir here. I might, I don't know, go for Garen, who I think is in the B tier, once I find him with my eyes. Garen's right here. So I could go something like Sivir Garen, or Sivir Quinn, or Sivir Vayne, or something, right? I can't do Sivir Vayne. They're both S tier. I think just like going through this and noticing every little bit will be so fascinating. And I'm so curious to see what the strategy ends up being, especially with the snake draft format. If someone gets an S tier and you want to stop them from getting like a very specific deck, like, I don't know, they steal... What's a good example for this? Let's say like Aikato steals Twisted Fate and you're like, Aikato, I don't want you playing Nami Twisted Fate. You could steal Nami, who is currently in the B tier, I think. Nami's in the C tier, so you could steal Nami. It doesn't cost you too much in terms of opportunity cost. And then you could maybe combine Nami with like a Lee Sin that you get later. But maybe, you know, Aikato will get really angry and say, fuck you, Spidz, I want Lee Sin now. For example, right? There's a lot of interesting things you can do. A few things that I've noticed through only looking at this for about 20 minutes or so for now. A few things that I've noticed is that both of the Lurk champions are in C. There are no Demacian champions in C, I think. I still feel like when I say that it must be wrong, but there are no Demacian champions in C. And some of the mutually exclusive stuff in the S and the A tier I think is kind of interesting. Multi-region champions might be really important. Stealing a Rumble so that you can play Bandle City or Noxus might be really integral to like trying to win. But I'm so curious. I'm lucky enough to be competing, and I'm really thankful for this opportunity that I can be competing. But as a spectator, I would just absolutely love to see what the drafting logic is for a lot of people. Because I think the drafting logic is absolutely fascinating. There's so much stuff that could happen here. And as someone that really misses expeditions, this is definitely giving me a fix that I did not realize I needed this badly. But I'll talk about this later. I think I'll make a few videos about the drafting format at some point. Like after the draft happens, I'll talk about what I did and why I did what I did. And maybe some interesting things I've noticed from the other people's drafts during that time. What can you expect from me? Maybe you've just watched the Pink Ghost video and you're trying to figure out, well, I can't watch like everything, right? I can't watch Aikato and Elzorn and Absolution and Tempo, right? Who can I watch? And so what you can expect from Spidz on YouTube is that I'll have a VOD review of all of my sets. You'll note, if you've seen some of my other stuff, what I do is I record my best of 3, I talk during my best of 3, and do my in-game logic. And then what I'll do is I'll go through my game and explain what I think are the most interesting plays that happened during that game, what lines I could have taken, what the differences between those lines were. And if I do make like a really good play, I want to explain why that play was so good and what logic was used to befall that. The point of the VOD reviews is twofold. One is to be educational. I want to show people like how to do things in certain situations if they've never been in these situations before, or they don't know what to do in this situation. There was an example in this Prodigy game, for example, where I talk about the value of Warning Shot in Plunder, and I've had a few people mention to me, hey, this explanation of Warning Shot in Plunder was quite useful. So I do a VOD review of the sets, and I'll probably do some stuff about the draft, because to me, like, the most fascinating thing about this is the draft. I think the draft will be absolutely, like... I'm so fascinated by this draft concept. I think it's so cool. If you want to watch some Spidz YouTube channel videos, this is what I recommend. I've got an advertisement that's about like 50 seconds long, where I talk about myself. It's a bit old at this point, to be honest. But a lot of people like this advertisement, so I thought I'd mention it here. I played in the Sentinels tournament, which is still ongoing, and for the first week, and the first game that I did was against Prodigy, and I think this game is really, really interesting. There are some moments that I think are quite interesting in it. There's a pass that happens that I think is fascinating, and there's a few decisions that I think are cool. I don't play this game perfectly, but no one does, right? I said the VOD reviews is twofold, by the way. The second reason is that I get to learn, and that's fun. And often in the comments, people will mention, in this position, I would have done this, which definitely happens in this Spidz versus Prodigy game, as well as the one underneath it, which is the final games of the World into Seasonals. Now, I didn't make it past the open rounds, but I did get 7 and 2. And that means when I was fighting other 7 and 2s, I got to, like, prevent them from entering. Like, I arguably, depending on circumstance, but I was the reason why Rusticles didn't make it into the tournament, for example. And if you want to see how that happened, you can watch that game down there. Finally, and, you know, I have to say this, I'm a YouTuber, I'm forced, I am legally coerced to mention that if you've not subscribed to the YouTube channel, you must. Now, what is really cool about this is that most people are subscribed, which means if you're not subscribed, you're, like, mathematically irregular and weird, and you're not a sheep. And if you want to be a sheep, and you want to be part of the Spidz YouTube channel, you should hit the subscribe button so that you can conglomerate into this massive Spidzian hegemonic blob, and I can, like, force you into, like, a nebulous circumstance, and you all act the same way because you're all going to be subscribed. I saw this graph and I was like, hold on, this is not how most people's graphs look, so I thought I'd share it. But that's all I wanted to say. I'm really excited for this format, and I'm really lucky that I got invited to this. I didn't expect to be invited to this. And I've been sitting on this for like 6 weeks or something. I've wanted to tell people about this for so long. I learnt about my invitation to this while I was in a voice call with some LOR people, and it was so hard not to leak. You don't know how much I wanted to tell people that there's a fucking draft format. And there was this tweet that someone did like a week ago talking about, like, wanting to do a draft format, and I was reading it and I was like, you don't know what's about to happen. It's so cool. Anyway, I hope you guys enjoyed, and feel free to watch Spidz YouTube if you're not familiar with Spidz YouTube. I'm really curious to see what the audience for the CDS is like, because my hope is that a lot of casual players that are interested in the format will, you know, enjoy it, right? And be interested in the sort of decks that are forced to be played. My concern is that it's just going to be competitive players again, and I think most competitive players on NA Shard that are interested in watching YouTube videos have probably, like, been aware of the Spidz YouTube, even if they don't watch regularly, just because I have advertised this a little bit. And, like, the competitive community for LOR is quite insular, right? Like, a lot of people know each other in the LOR community because they'll watch each other on Twitch, or they'll, you know, they're all on the Twitters or on the Discords or whatever. So I think, like, the community for LOR is quite insular. So I don't know what this will end up looking like. Like, I've advertised myself in this video talking about who I am. I don't know if it's going to be like a repeat to literally everyone listening, because it's just going to be the same people that have already listened to my intro before. Or if it's going to be new people. I don't know what the audience is like for this one, but I wanted to make this video so that, like, if there are people that have seen the CDS video and maybe recognize Icado or recognize Tempo, but don't recognize, you know, me or Elzon or people like that, they can check them out. And I wanted to make this video just so people would know who I am, the sort of stuff you can expect from me, and just how fucking, like, excited I am for this. This is so cool. But thank you all for watching, and I shall see you in a week, because I'm pretty sure the draft is in a week. Enjoy. And subscribe. I've said this a few times. Hopefully you do. I want to siphon AdSense out of you if I can.